The rain fell like whispers from the heavens, soft, steady, and unforgiving. Black umbrellas dotted the cemetery like bruises on a pale body, and beneath them stood silent mourners, faces damp with a mixture of rain and sorrow. I stood at the edge of the grave, barely feeling the cold water seeping into my shoes. My fingers clutched the rosary beads harder than I realized. My husband of 41 years was now a memory, resting inside a box lowered into the earth like a secret buried too soon. I couldn't cry anymore. I had wept for months before this day. Through his illness, through the long nights, the hospital stays, the quiet decline. And now there was nothing left in me but an empty ache that echoed through my bones. Arjun stood beside me, tall and clean, cut in his tailored black suit. His expression was unreadable. People patted him on the shoulder, offered murmurs of condolences, but he barely acknowledged them. His eyes remained dry. I reached for his hand, as I had when he was a child and needed comfort, but he shifted slightly, and my hand fell back to my side. Perhaps it was grief. I told myself that we all process it differently. After the final shovel of soil fell onto the casket, the crowd began to drift away. I lingered, my fingers brushing the wet headstone, whispering a soft goodbye into the misty air. Arjun appeared beside me. "Come on, Ma," he said flatly. "Let's go." He led me to his car, opened the passenger door for me, then got in without a word. The ride was quiet. I stared out the window at a world that looked unchanged, shops open, children running under umbrellas, life continuing, as if the love of my life hadn't just been erased. "You're coming home with me," Arjun said suddenly, eyes on the road. I turned toward him. "Just for a few days," I replied. "I don't want to be a burden." "You won't be," he said. His voice was calm, too calm, like he'd already rehearsed something. I thought of how much I had poured into him, how I stayed up through nights nursing him through fevers, made excuses for his teenage mistakes, and smiled when he brought home the woman who barely looked at me during dinner. Still, I welcomed her. I was his mother. That's what mothers do. The road twisted, and I noticed he'd taken a different route. "This isn't the way to your apartment." "I know," he said. I waited for an explanation, but none came. Just the hum of the engine and the wet tires on asphalt. We drove for another 20 minutes, out past the edge of the city, into a stretch of road I didn't recognize lined with tall trees, their branches bending low with rain. Then, without warning, he pulled over onto the muddy shoulder and turned off the engine. I looked at him, confused. Arjun, he didn't look at me. He opened his door, got out, and walked around to my side, opened it. "This is where you get off." I blinked at him, thinking I'd misheard. "What? This is it, Ma. You're getting out here." My throat closed up. "I don't understand. What are you talking about?" He stepped back and gestured to the woods beside the road. "You can't live with me. I've got a life to run, a business, a wife who never agreed to take in anyone. The house you and Dad lived in is already sold. You don't have anywhere to go." I felt dizzy. "Then why bring me here?" "Because I figured it'd be easier. Just get out of the car, Ma. You'll figure something out." He dropped my small bag on the muddy ground. I reached for his arm. "Arjun, please, you can't be serious. I'm your mother." His eyes met mine for the first time that day. "Exactly, you're my mother. You chose Dad over everything. You gave him everything. You never had anything left for me. I grew up watching you nurse a man while I raised myself." I stared at him, stunned. That house was filled with sickness, silence, and your goddamn charity to strangers. Not once did you ask what I needed, and now I'm telling you what I need, distance. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "So you brought me here to throw me away." He didn't answer. Just walked back to the car, got in, and drove off. The taillights vanished into the misty road, and I was left standing in the rain. My husband gone, my child a stranger, and the world colder than I had ever known. The rain had slowed, but I barely noticed. My hands trembled as I bent down to lift the small, soaked bag Arjun had tossed at my feet. My fingers were stiff with cold. Every joint ached, but it wasn't just the weather. It was the grief of a second, more violent funeral. This time, for a bond that should never have died. I looked down that empty road for minutes, hoping, praying, that I'd see his car reverse, that he would open the door and say he was sorry, that this had all been some horrible mistake. But nothing came, only silence, only trees. I turned toward the woods, the path uncertain and unfriendly, and began to walk. The first hour was a blur. The forest swallowed me with every step. My shoes squelched in the mud, my shawl weighed down with water. I stumbled over roots and nearly fell into a ditch, but something ancient in me kept moving. Perhaps it was the part of me that had survived childbirth, grief, long nights beside a hospital bed. The quiet ache of love stretched thin but never broken. I wasn't ready to die, not here, not like this. By nightfall, I found it. A broken old cabin hidden behind a thicket of ferns. Half the roof had collapsed, and the walls were warped with time, but it had a dry corner and what looked like an old cot. It smelled of rot and dust, but I had no choice. I slept that night with one hand on my bag and the other over my heart, trying to hold myself together. The days that followed were quiet, cruel, and oddly clarifying. There was no food, only wild berries I remembered from my childhood and rainwater I collected in an old metal pan I found outside. I boiled it over a fire I built with trembling hands, remembering how my mother once showed me how to strike a match beneath wet leaves. I scavenged, foraged, and rationed the few snacks I'd packed for what I thought was just a car ride. I thought of Arjun often, how his eyes had looked that day, not angry, not even hateful, just indifferent. That was the part that gutted me. He had stopped seeing me as a person to him. I was a problem to be removed. I cried once, just once. Curled up under an old blanket, I let out the scream that had been lodged in my throat since the funeral. It echoed through the empty woods, answered only by crows. The next morning, I opened the bag again not for food, but for the last photograph of my husband. Instead, I found an envelope. It was heavy, thick, and sealed with wax. My name was on it, in his handwriting. I nearly dropped it. Inside was a key, a note, and a folded document. The note read, "If you are reading this, something has gone wrong. I'm sorry. I wanted to protect you, even from our own son if it came to that. The cabin you're in is old family land, yours now. The key is to a safety deposit box. I left everything in your name, not his, because you were the one who stayed." My hands trembled as I unfolded the document: land deeds, account numbers, and the name of a lawyer I didn't recognize. A postscript followed. "Don't go back to the world as the woman they broke. Go back as the one they underestimated." For the first time in days, I felt warmth. Not in my body, but in my soul. He hadn't just left me grief, he had left me power. I stayed in the cabin for 2 more weeks, long enough to gather strength, map the land, and plan my next move. Each day I became less of the woman who had been abandoned on that road, and more of the one who had survived it. I walked to the nearest village with a scarf over my head and a limp in my step. I sold a small gold ring from my finger for just enough money to take a bus to the city. Back to the place where Arjun now lived like a king in the ruins of what used to be my life, but I didn't return to beg. I returned to build and to reclaim what was mine. The city hadn't changed, but I had. I stepped off the dusty village bus wearing a simple cotton sari, a bag slung over my shoulder, and a fire in my chest that didn't burn. It smoldered. Quiet, steady, no one recognized me, and I preferred it that way. The broken woman from the funeral was gone. In her place stood someone older, harder, and wiser. My hair was streaked with gray, but my eyes had never been clearer. The first thing I did was visit the lawyer mentioned in my husband's note. His office was tucked between a florist and a pharmacy in a quiet lane off Marine Drive. The door bore the name Mr. Harish Mehta, Estate Law. He greeted me like he'd known me for years. "Mrs. Sinha," he said, standing. "We've been waiting for you." He pulled out a thick folder, the weight of which felt like an answer to every question I'd had. The accounts were untouched. My husband had hidden money across several banks under different family trusts. Stocks, properties, even a small plot of land outside Pune with a functioning mango orchard, all in my name. "Not Arjun's, never Arjun's, he came here, you know," Mr. Mehta said, almost apologetically. "Weeks before the funeral, demanded access. We turned him away. Your husband was very clear. Nothing was to be disclosed to anyone but you." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "Thank you. I rented a small flat near Dadar Station. Modest, clean, filled with sunlight. I didn't want a mansion. I wanted space, air, quiet, and from there I began to rebuild. Not for revenge, for balance, but sometimes the two are the same. I contacted everyone Arjun had wronged, quietly. The maid who had worked for us for 15 years, let go without severance. The gardener whose wages were withheld when my husband died. The compounder who brought medicine in the dead of night and was never paid for the final 6 visits. To each of them, I gave what they were owed and more. In my husband's name. The stories began to spread. Not loudly, but in whispers. Meera Sinha is back. No, she's not dead. She's helping people. She's different now. Meanwhile, Arjun's empire, the one built on selling off memories and blood, began to crack. His flashy startup collapsed under the weight of unpaid debts and bad investments. His in-laws, who had once celebrated his ambition, now whispered disapproval. His wife left him, perhaps because his charm was no longer profitable. And then, the final blow came from the most unexpected place. A charity, set up anonymously by me, purchased the house he grew up in. My house, the one he sold without even telling me. The buyers were clear. It was to become a women's shelter. For abandoned mothers, the press called it poetic. Arjun called it a betrayal. I called it home. One evening, I sat by the lake, feeding crusts of bread to ducks, when I felt a shadow beside me. It was him. Arjun, thinner, paler, the kind of tired you can't sleep away. Maud, he said, like the word was unfamiliar on his tongue. I've been looking for you. I didn't turn. Looks like you found me. He sat slowly. Silence stretched between us like a bridge with no planks. I lost everything, he said eventually. I know. They said you were behind it. No, I said, tossing a piece of bread into the water. You were behind it. I just didn't stop it from falling. He turned to me. His eyes weren't cruel now. They were desperate. I'm sorry. I was angry. I didn't know how much you had done for me. Anger doesn't throw someone out on a road. I replied. That's not anger. That's character. He flinched. I have nothing now. He whispered. No house, no money, no one. I came here to ask if I could stay with you, just until I get back on my feet. I looked at him for a long moment, and for a second, just a second, I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who used to wait at the gate for me after school, who used to fall asleep on my lap during power cuts, who used to call me Ma with reverence. But that boy had died on a rainy road, and the man in front of me had buried him. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside a bus ticket, a prepaid phone card, and a single folded note. I handed it to him. He opened it, eyes scanning the words. This is where you get off. He looked up, stunned. You're turning me away. I stood, adjusting my shawl. No, I'm letting you go. There's a difference. He didn't call out after me, didn't try to stop me. As I walked away, the wind picked up, but I didn't feel cold, because I had already survived the worst. In this time, I wasn't walking away from a son, I was walking toward myself.